Good morning, brothers and sisters. Welcome to our new year, because this is Advent 1, and therefore our new edition of Faith Matters. We're just kind of getting our text squared away so that we can begin with our Bible conversation. I was asked last week, Father, are we going to have a specific Advent study this year? And the answer to that is no, for a number of reasons. I've chosen to just continue the format that we've been following, which is a guided conversation on the gospel, primarily because these gospel passages are so poignant, and they really are pointing toward the Christmas and the incarnation of Jesus, but also because of the format that we have right now. We don't have the ability to be gathered together. We really don't have the ability to do a book study, because different people come in and out of Faith Matters on a week-by-week basis. And we don't really have the ability to do a video study simply because our time is so compressed at 9 o'clock. So we will continue with the format that we've been doing. And actually, the real reason is because I so enjoy the perspectives that each of you bring to the table. This is my favorite half hour of the week, just getting to listen to what you are hearing, the questions you're asking, pondering together what the meaning of that gospel is for us in this time and in this place. So, without any further ado, we have moved from one liturgical year to the next. Last year, we spent much of our time exploring the Gospel of Matthew. This new year, which begins today, we start with the Gospel of Mark. So let me give you Mark's Gospel today. Jesus said, "In those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Neither the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey, when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake."
Father, why don't I give you my phone, as is our habit. I will be the Gen phone substitute. I haven't seen any comments other than good morning, everybody who's watching, and they're also happy that you're well, which means they saw your live stream yesterday.
Thank you, my friends. I am very pleased to be here, although I was very comforted by the fact that I have an able partner in crime here who was going to make sure that everything went well. So that made life a lot easier, but believe me, I'm happy to be here. So, interesting gospel passage. What did you hear? What challenged you? What comforted you? What do you have questions about?
Well, Rick, while our great theologians are thinking up really ingenious remark, and that they will start appearing on the phone there,
Right.
let me say something that's definitely secondary or tertiary. But what I noticed as Rick was reading was that I know this passage, for whatever reason, so much better in the King James. And here's my not very important point that really matters to me. They always say the best writing, and especially the most poetic, can actually be translated. So you take a Chinese poem, but a beautifully written one, and it will translate. Same from Greek or Roman,
Right.
or Hebrew, whatever it is. Mark's writing is so unbelievably poetic that even as I hear this in the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, which is less poetic than the Elizabethan English, it is still exactly the words you read, incredibly poetic. This is just gorgeous writing. Now I will turn it over to the theologians.
And just in case what somebody heard, because I want to counter this before it even starts, in case someone heard Father Chris say that Mark wrote this in the Old English King James Version, that's not the case.
That's correct. I think everybody knows it was written in Koine Greek.
But do they? Do they really? There
Well,
are a
they
lot of
do
people
now, I
out
just
there
said
who
it.
think that Jesus himself wrote the King James Version.
Well, let me give you one sentence on it. It was written in a Greek that was like a universal Greek that traders understood, a simple Greek. I'm avoiding to say pidgin Greek, but beautiful, clear, concise, hugely inspired by the Holy Spirit Greek. And it holds up in any language, even right to 2020 in the middle of COVID. It is gorgeous.
Right. Okay, to your comments. Carol says when she was a kid, she thought that this passage meant that we weren't even supposed to sleep.
I'm glad you got clarification.
She's like, I'm glad I figured that out.
Right.
Yeah, Jen says, after all that suffering, it sounds like our current times. Yeah, this could have been written last week, not 2,000 years ago, could it? Kelly says, this reminds me of the song, If Today Were Your Last Day. What I'm doing today is to live Christ. Well said. Be ready, be alert, pay attention. There's a lot of that. Rosalie says, heaven and earth will pass away. What does that mean? That's a great question. I think we need to look at the context, right? Somebody want to take that? Oh, I guess that's me. Okay. I didn't know if we had a deep theologian who wanted to write in on that one.
Well, you seem to set up, like when you said the context, you were going to now give some context.
I guess I will give some context. All right, I will now step shamelessly on the sermon because I'm going to talk about that in about an hour.
Be shameless.
What we need to remember, my friends, is that this gospel was written not for us, not for a Christian audience, because when this gospel was written, or at least when Jesus was leaving this parable, Christianity didn't exist. He was talking to Jews. Jesus, if you'll remember, is a Jew. So he's talking to the Jews. And the Jewish version of the coming of the Son of Man is markedly different from our Christian interpretation of it. So we need to make sure we don't try to take our 21st century Judeo-Christian lens and apply that to a first century scripture that was written exclusively for a Jewish audience. They really focused upon the coming apocalypse. Apocalypse really does mean end of the world, but not the way we think of the end of the world. For in Jewish thought, the only way God was going to be able to break into the world and restore it to its rightful place, meaning with them on top, was to destroy the current world first. So the day of the Lord and the apocalypse that had to happen wasn't something to be avoided, it was something to be embraced. because that was a necessary step to get to that next part. It's sort of like, ladies, forgive me, because I'm a guy and I don't understand it, but I'm going to use the analogy anyway. It's sort of like the pain of childbirth. No one wants the pain, but what you get as a result of it is worth the pain. That's kind of what they're looking at here. The apocalypse is going to be hard, but after the apocalypse comes the payoff.
I think it's important to remember, too, that we not be anachronistic, as you're saying, don't be anachronistic. And remember, too, that the hearers of Isaiah and the hearers of this gospel knew that there were shooting stars and that sometimes the sun would get blocked and sometimes the moon would get blocked. They did not know when an eclipse happened that it was actually a round moon from a round earth making a round shape on the sun or moon, depending on whether it's a solar or lunar eclipse. They just knew that the sun, which was reliably light, was suddenly getting dark. And in their art, and remember too, this was a mostly illiterate culture, and it's been proven that a brain hears and memorizes and understands and feels things very differently when the only words you know from being spoken or sung. So to hear the words of Isaiah would be inside people in a way that we really, just like childbirth, we men can't understand. We 21st century people cannot understand what hearing Isaiah on Sunday mornings was actually like. We might kind of sort of maybe imagine it, but in fact, I haven't not imagined what having a baby's like. And imagining it doesn't get me much closer. It's just a mystery. And so all these astronomical things were mysteries, but to have somebody talk about it was kind of helpful. It actually wasn't frightening. It was peace-inspiring and calm-inducing to name the fact that sometimes the sun was darkened and the moon and stars fell from the sky. They didn't know it was just a tiny little fragment of rock lighting on fire coming into our atmosphere. All the things we take for granted, like a round earth, were not where they were then. And so these words were received hugely differently.
Well said. Well said. So, to your comments. Jen says that the first paragraph is alluding to the future coming of Christ. Yeah, then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. That really follows along with our gospel from last Sunday, doesn't it? When God will come, the Son of Man will come to judge the earth. Focus on my part in the picture as an individual servant, and that is comforting. Yeah, there is an element of do what you can do. You can't worry about the great cosmic realities. We can't impact the shooting stars, but we can impact our world right where we are. I see that. Carol says, and they thought Jesus would come back in their lifetime. I was waiting to see who was going to pick up on that one. Yeah, this is a really interesting passage because Jesus contradicts himself here. I know, before you start sending me hate mail, it is in fact true. Because he says in here, truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. And then one more sentence later, he says, but about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, only the Father. So Jesus tells us it's going to happen, but then Jesus tells us he doesn't know when. And Jesus is in fact God. This is, the three parts of the Trinity. Each one of them has a distinct yet united experience. And so Jesus is telling us the Son of Man will come again, but his time frame is a little different than our time frame. And I see lots and lots of comments popping now. Maybe we stirred the pot. Brian says, it seems from this that predestination is an established fact. The question remains, however, to what extent do we still have free will? Oh, I think we have a great deal of free will. Because we choose to accept this or to not accept it. And even if we accept it, there are gradations of how much we live into it, right? What do you mean, Rick? Well, we know that the Son of Man will come back and we will all be judged. And we get that. And we also know that we can accept the gospel or ignore the gospel. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that since you're watching this live stream, you probably are falling into the camp of accepting the gospel. But even then...
Oh, if only it were that easy.
I know, right? I know. There are a lot of people who doubt, and that's okay. Holy doubt is a beautiful thing. But how much we embrace the gospel and how much we live into it is really up to us. I talked last week about when Jesus judges us, he's not going to ask us about how much we saved in our 401k or what kind of car we drove. Jesus is going to ask us, how much did we do acts of love for one another? So there are gradations, and free will is part of it. We are the slaves, each with his or her own work to do. Right on the money, Jen. Yeah, Schuller mentions that what we're talking about here in the Bible story sounds a lot like what's happening right now in 2020. Revelation, could this be part of the book of Revelation? I don't know. I'm not going to tell you it's not, but I'm also not going to tell you it is. Because the reality is, we don't know. We have lived through crises like this before. Nobody in our lifetime has, but the Spanish flu in 1918, God bless you,
excuse me,
was just as deadly and just as virulent. And we have had many, many other challenges that have befallen us. It's very easy to project Bible stories into our current life when it's supposed to be the other way around. We use the Bible as a way to interpret our current life. Danny says he feels that Jesus is warning the early church against false prophets who seek their own glory and not the glory of Christ, who will forsake his teachings and lead the flock astray. There's always a fair amount of that in Jesus' preaching, because it's happened all the time. We make jokes from time to time here at Faith Matters about the televangelists. And Father Chris and I have agreed to disagree about Joel Osteen, but there are any host of other people who make extraordinarily large sums of money essentially peddling the gospel. And that is a challenge. And when you do that, you're preaching that sort of prosperity gospel, and that can be very dangerous. You really need to not pervert the gospel. Kelly says she's uncomfortable with what I've heard regarding the concept of the elect. Can we clarify? Oh, okay, sure. Took me a second. I wasn't with you. I think what you're referring to is the passage at the end. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. So, again, I'm going to step on the sermon. I got to stop preaching on the gospel because I give it all away at Faith Matters. The Jews believed that they were, in fact, the chosen people. We know this to be the case, right? And by this point in their history, they had all but given up on the concept that they would be able to achieve their rightful place by human means. They weren't strong enough. They weren't rich enough. What they needed was for God to break into the world to restore them to their rightful place. And that's what was going to take this apocalypse that we're talking about. But when that happened, Jewish thought at the time was that all the Jews who had been dispersed all throughout heaven and earth would be regathered back into Palestine so that they could all be there to witness their assumption of their rightful place, the restoration of the temple as the seat of God. That's what we're talking about. That's what Jesus is talking about here with the elect. Again, it's something that would have needed no explanation to the audience at the time, but it's a foreign concept to us.
And Jesus preaches different ways himself. He's being apocalyptic here, and he uses the word elect, I think, as Rick correctly says, knowing that his audience would have known and been totally comfortable with the idea of a chosen people electness. Yet we know at 1,000 other places in Jesus' gospel that when people say, well, how do I get to be the elect? He says, be the slave of all. He says, if you have a shirt stolen, give the coat also. I mean, if you have a coat stolen, give the shirt also. And this humility and selflessness and servant/slave mentality is actually what makes you the elect. So whenever we just have a gospel reading on Sunday, it's a part of Jesus and not the whole. And so we can always morph that what we hear on Sunday with what we know of the rest of Jesus' sayings here. But again, as Rick has said, he's talking to an audience that he understands. They're totally comfortable and familiar and happy about this idea of being elect. It was not offensive or scary, I don't think.
No, and it wasn't even intended to really be exclusionary because it was so ingrained in who they were.
Exactly.
It was, you were either an us or a them. And them certainly had some degree of looking down on, but no one thought of anything different. It's just how it was. You were a Jew or you were a Gentile. Gentile simply meant not a Jew. So anyone could be a Gentile.
And again, it's the same Jesus who tells the story of the Good Samaritan, where a Gentile's the hero, and all the elect, all the chosen, are clearly not going to be gathered up by the angels in the Good Samaritan story, which was authored and regularly told by Jesus.
Right. Yeah, Jesus wasn't necessarily endorsing the idea. He was merely using their existing interpretation to teach them something. That's what good teachers do.
Like Joel Osteen.
And Dr. Rosalie Marinelli.
There we go.
Kelly says, so a Calvinistic interpretation doesn't quite fit here. Yeah, that's exactly right. Calvin really was into predestination, that everything is fixed and we can't do anything about it. That's really not, that's not our interpretation. And it certainly, to me, doesn't seem to be Jesus' interpretation, because if it was, why would he say the things he says? So Calvin and I differ on a lot of those things.
I think Calvin he's really seeing things large. When you get your macro perspective out to a point where, like God's, time no longer exists, and God knows before Charles Manson is born that Charles Manson's going to ask his little slaves to kill people, that it starts to look like we're all just a bunch of puppets, since God chose to still create the woman who had Charles Manson known to God even when Charles Manson was in his mother's womb. It starts to look predestination-y, but it is also not. It's a paradox. What makes it simpler and what makes Calvin a little more understandable is to remember again and again that God is in and outside of time. Well, which is it? I just said God is in and A-N-D, outside of time, inside and outside. To the extent that God is outside, God can start looking like a God who created a world that's entirely predestined and we're all just puppets. But we know in our God-created gut that that's not true. I decided to have tea at church this morning and not tea at my condominium. God knew I was going to make that decision, but I made it. Right?
Yeah. We've gone from Manson to tea. We cover it all here at Faith Matters.
Got it all.
So let me ask you this, my friends. Of all the different gospel passages that we could have had in Advent 1, why did the lectionary compilers choose this particular passage for the first Sunday of Advent?
Well, it's certainly an attention getter.
It does get your attention.
I feel like you have a better answer, though.
I'm just curious what people... I hate to ask the question and then answer it myself.
Okay, let's see.
I love to give people an opportunity to give us some of their wisdom.
Let's see what the theologians come up with.
They're typing.
All right.
They're typing. I mean, think about it. We're looking forward to the coming of Jesus, that little beautiful baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. We're going to see the angels. We're going to see the shepherds. We're going to sing Silent Night. That's all wonderful stuff. And yet we're starting with the sun will be darkened, the moon won't give its light, the stars will be falling from the heaven, the earth will be shaken. Whoa, wait, what? Huh? What? What's that all about? Be awake, we're being told. Chris, you're getting some agreement. Carol says, that's how I think. God knows what choice I will make, but he doesn't make me choose. Right. Free will is sort of paradoxical.
Yes.
But you can look at it as the ultimate gift of love from God, because God made us, and God therefore designed us. God could have made us without free will. But he loves us so much, he gave us that gift. Wow. That's literally awesome. All right, to my question about why this gospel. Dina says it shows us a bigger picture. Quite true. Rosalie says maybe to wake us up, to listen. To really listen, not just to hear. Yeah. There is that tendency to take a gospel like this, which is a more difficult one, and just kind of go la, 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 and let it go over you as you're looking forward to singing Silent Night. But that's not what we do. Jen says it puts the whole Christmas story into perspective. Yeah? Kelly says it still prepare you the way of the Lord, just in a longer term sense.
I just want to quickly say about, 4 comments ago about paradox. I find that to the degree we get comfortable with paradox, a lot of spirituality becomes not only easier, but just more true. For Westerners, and I don't mean Western United States, I mean Euro-cultured folks, paradox is more challenging than it is, if I can stereotype, for the average, more Zen Asian.
Right.
And I guess I'm inviting all of my brothers and sisters, where you find paradox in life, don't try to find an A or a B when it's A and B. Try to breathe into, pray into, put yourself into that location where A and B can both be right, even though they feel a little uncomfortable with one another. And all of your spiritual life, I think, will go better.
I could not have said it any better, my friends. If you're struggling to understand something, embrace the paradox and give yourself permission to not have a clear-cut answer. I know that sounds scary, but it actually does make life easier, and it makes your spiritual life really blossom, and you'll find new avenues opening to you that you have never contemplated before. Okay, my friends. We have reached the end of our time together, short though it was. I so enjoy your comments, your understanding, and your willingness to share with one another. We will be with you again in half an hour for our Advent One worship service. Can't wait for you to see the church. It looks beautiful. Our altar guild has done an amazing job, as they always do. So, we'll see you in half an hour for our service, followed by our virtual coffee hour, and Father Chris is going to get the last word.
I am. Just a prayer request that our live stream goes smoothly. Manny's going to be operating the computer, and Joseph's not here this morning. And so if you just keep all that in your prayers, that things go off in their best way possible, I would appreciate that.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Thank you, my friends.